Welcome to this HMO Matters podcast, where we are going to talk about the benefit of strong communities living with your HMO. So we'll cover what they are, why they are important, and how we go about creating and maintaining those communities. So I'm going to start by telling you about our very first two HMOs that we developed. The first was based in Guildford. We did the conversion, we bought the property, did the conversion, and ended up with a 6-bedroom property and 3 bathrooms. Now, when we came around to filling it with tenants, we hadn't even really thought about the community of the property. Our strategy, if you like, or methodology was that if anybody was employed and passed a credit check, we would put them in the property. Now, as luck would happen, and without any design or foresight on our behalf, there were a couple of companies that were recruiting quite heavily in Guildford at that time, and they were recruiting graduate level individuals for white collar sector jobs. So basically this meant that by default, we filled the house up with a tenant profile of early to mid 20s, working professionals, and we had a mix of males to females. So we filled up the house, happy days. We jumped straight on to our next project, which was in Farnborough. Slightly different, well, not very different, but slightly different in terms of it was 5 bedrooms and not 6. But what was very different was the tenants we ended up with. So because still at the stage, it hadn't dawned upon us quite how important the community aspect was, we just went about filling up the house, and we ended up, again, not by design, but with a very disparate community of tenants. So different ages, at different stages of their lives, some white collar, some blue collar, the difference between the two houses, the contrast between the two is huge, because when we did our visits to the Guildford property, everybody was getting on well, enjoying the communal areas. They would often be, making a meal, or a couple of them watching TV when we dropped round, and they would say hi and would have a chat. Compare this to Farnborough with our disparate bunch of tenants, and we were going round to do our normal visits, and normally the tenants weren't in sight. They were in their rooms, or if they were, there was just one of them cooking a meal. So no real sense of community whatsoever. This really taught us the importance of community. And since then, it's been a real cornerstone of our strategy and philosophy, and is up there, as much as the location of the property and the design, the community for us is equally as, if not more, important than those two other aspects. And we learned very quickly from the Guildford house and the Farnborough house. In the Guildford house, people would stay longer, and when we did viewings, we would fill up the rooms far more quickly than with the Farnborough house, where there was a higher turnover and it was harder to fill the rooms. We filled them, but it was just harder and more work. So the evidence is there right in front of us. So why are strong communities important in your property? So this is the analogy that I come up with people. And basically, if you have a great night out with your friends, what makes it great? Is it the venue or the people you're with? It could be both, but more often it's the people you are with, and rarely the venue on its own, that makes it a memorable occasion. So this just emphasizes the importance of a community. Your HMO could be brand new. It could be, resembling a 5-star hotel on Instagram with lots of positive comments. But unless you think about the community, and unless you work on putting the right community in that property, it certainly is not going to help you as much as it could if you did have the right community. In fact, we know come across people who've got amazing properties, and often, they're messaging that they're struggling to fill the rooms, and it becomes fairly apparent to us that, maybe they're not thinking about the community, or they're using an agent who isn't really focusing enough on the tenant profile, and, tenants viewing are just seeing a great property, but because they don't know who they're going to be living with, they might decide to go elsewhere. So, that just underlines the importance of the community aspect of it. So what can we do to create and maintain this community? So it starts with the design of your property. Now, if you can do this, and often you can't because the architecture might be wrong to do this, or it just could be too much work and not be viable. But if you can do it, if you've got a kind of open blank page on your property and you can pretty much configure it as you like, then we always go for open plan living areas. So this is a kitchen and living room, very open plan, often with a kitchen island and a hub, and maybe these days we also have a couple of desk areas in that property, and that is really going to encourage the tenant community in the property, because they could be cooking, could be catching up with a bit of work, could be watching TV, but it's going to make them less likely to hide away in their rooms, and they're really going to enjoy that hub, particularly if it's well designed. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we do not ever put kitchenettes in bedrooms. I don't think it's that common, but I do come across people that think it's beneficial to have a few bedrooms of kitchenettes. For us, it's a no-go, a no-no rather. It doesn't help with the community of the property. The other thing we tend not to do, in fact, we never do, is put TVs in bedrooms for similar reasons. So when you're designing your property, think about those things at the design stage. The second thing is decide on your community profile. So for us and for a lot of people, it's working professionals, maybe rather stereotypically in their early mid-20s, but you need to understand what that profile is. Some people have different profiles. It could be students, it could be older individuals. So there's a market now for, more middle-aged people who perhaps separated, divorced. They want to live, they want to move on. They still want to live in a community. So that type of profile could work as well. In fact, that's a model that's becoming more and more popular. But you need to know what your community is and you need to stick to it. And then when you're attracting tenants, we sell the community in our advert. So great with all the Instagrammable photos of your newly designed HMO, but we also write in the advert a little bit about the existing tenants, their name, occupation, how long they've been there. We ask their permission first, obviously, but normally they don't mind. And we put that in the advert to just sell the property based on the people that are living there rather than just the property itself. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about, and this is the most important part of maintaining your tenant community, and that is use your existing tenants in the process of finding new tenants when existing tenants move out for whatever reason. So basically, we go as far as we can with this, and our existing tenants, most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time, our existing tenants will actually do the viewings themselves. So we will do the initial vetting on Spare Room or Open Rent or Facebook or whatever it might be, and if a tenant fits that profile, we will then arrange for them to go and visit the property and meet the existing tenants. We don't even go to the viewing. So the only time we step in is when the existing tenants come back and they say, hey, we've just met Jane and John, really nice person, please can we move forward? And then invariably, very soon after, we hear from Jane or John and they say, just gone round to your property, really loved it, we want to move forward. Now, had our tenants not been there, I think it's often, if I know from experience, that it is far less likely that they're going to come back reserving that room straight away. More often than not, they will, go to the other viewings or they'll wait and look at other options just because of the fear of the unknown of who they're going to be living with. So it's really, really important to involve your tenants. Now, the only downside of this is, and it happens a fair amount, if the tenants don't feel right about someone or they're just unsure, they have some reservations, you need to respect that and walk away. You have to totally value your tenant's judgment, otherwise it is not going to work. More often than not, when that happens, there's not somebody else around the corner who comes and visits the next day that can work out. So you've got to have the courage of your convictions on that, and you've got to trust and let your tenants get on with it. So what else do we do for tenant community? So we encourage tenant get-togethers. We provide things like barbecues. Often randomly, if a new tenant's moving in or if a couple of tenants are moving in, we'll just say, hey guys, we're going to put some money in one of your accounts, get some takeaway, get some beer, have a get together, we'll shout you some beers or shout you some, food for the barbecue. So you don't need to do it often, but just, once a year or even at Christmas or in the middle of summer is great. And your tenants will really appreciate that. It'll make them feel cared and respected and well regarded, and they will reward you by treating you in the same way. So just in that vein, it's important just for good tenant management, but also for maintaining that community. You've just got to offer your tenants a great service. treat them like clients. Set yourself out to be different to other landlords who treat their tenants like walking invoices and don't really think about them as people. You know, a lot of these tenants, they might have just come out of university and been in really bad, you know, accommodation with awful landlords, you know, who don't really care so much about anything other than just providing a roof over their head for the tenant and collecting the rent. So your tenants will really appreciate it if you treat them well, and you know, if you can build that relationship with them, then it will help hugely. And go the extra mile as well. So one thing we often do, which works really well, is if we have a vacant room, it might have been, you know, vacant for a week, and we've got a tenant who wants to move into that room. So let's say it's available from July the 1st, but your tenant can't take up that tenancy until mid-July because they're paying rent at their other place until then. So we will often say to the tenant, well, hey, listen, the room's free anyway. You can move in on the 1st of July, and you can effectively have those 2 weeks. Don't pay rent then. Just start paying rent on the 15th of July, which is when you want your tenancy to start. When you wanted your tenancy to start. Now, it costs us nothing to do because the room's free anyway, but they will, whether they take you up on the offer or not, they will really, really appreciate you offering that, because it shows how much you care about them as a landlord, and they'll really, really appreciate it. So all these things will reward you in spades. It will make your house a happier environment. Happy tenants equals a happy environment, which makes it much easier to attract new tenants. It means they will stay significantly longer, and also you'll attract top rents. If you treat your tenants well, they will also help you. You know, we get so many tenants that we put into houses that have come directly from recommendations. So if someone's leaving, more often than not, we'll just get a call from the tenants and just say, hey, we understand John Smith's leaving, but we know there's someone else who wants to move in. They know it's a great property and that, you know, you guys manage it really, really well. And, you know, can they move in? Yeah, done, often done without even the need to view. So it'll really, really help your referral process of getting tenants in. And if they're referred from existing tenants, that will maintain the community and it will just perpetualize and go on and on, basically. So, you know, that's why your tenants relationships are really important in helping maintain that community. But the other thing about the community is it just makes your job as a landlord or HMO manager, just makes it so much nicer. If you're going around to the property, having a chat with your tenants, maybe a cup of tea, getting on with them, and you know they're really enjoying the property and appreciating each other, it really is, you know, makes you feel like you're working to live and not living to work. And yeah, and you know, certainly for us, it makes our job so much more enjoyable. So that's basically that on this podcast. There's more we can say, but I'm just trying to give you the highlights of you know, what you can do to help develop and maintain those communities. I hope you found it useful. For more podcasts, visit our YouTube channel, HMO Matters, or go to our website, hmomatters.co.uk, and there's some more information there. And I hope to engage with you soon. Thank you very much for listening.